What if one of the most beloved actors in Hollywood, the man known for playing America's everyman, got stranded in the rain with no phone, no crew, and no help in sight? No red carpets, no bodyguards, just silence and a stranger's garage. This isn't a movie plot. It's a real story that few people know until now. On a stormy night, far away from cameras and fame, Tom Hanks found himself cold, lost, and alone. And what happened next became one of the most unexpected and heartfelt moments of his life. This is the untold story of the night Tom Hanks slept in a stranger's garage. And by the time you reach the end, you'll understand why that night meant more than any award he's ever won.
It was early spring, the kind of spring that still carried winter's sadness in the wind. Tom Hanks had just finished a long, exhausting press tour, smiling for cameras, answering the same questions, pretending everything was okay, when deep down, it wasn't. Only a few weeks earlier, he had lost one of his closest friends, someone who had been like a brother to him since the early days of his career. The world never saw his grief, but it followed him like a shadow. He needed to get away, not to a resort, not on a jet, but away from Hollywood, from the noise, from himself. So he got into an old car, something vintage and quiet, no tack, no tracking, and just drove, alone. He took the back roads, passed through dusty small towns where no one cared who he was, no driver, no entourage, just Tom and the open road. But somewhere along a narrow road just outside a forgotten town off the I-5, the car began to cough, a sputter, then silence. He turned the key again, nothing. A flicker on the dash, then dark. And as if the universe was trying to make a point, the skies opened. The rain poured like grief itself, heavy, relentless. He checked his phone, 3% battery, no signal, then dead. He stepped out into the rain. No umbrella, no jacket, just a hoodie pulled tight and hands shoved deep in his pockets. He walked down the winding road, soaked to the bone, until he saw it, a small house with an open garage door. A dim yellow light glowed from inside. There was an old couch, a shelf of tools, a dry place. It wasn't glamorous, but in that moment, it looked like a miracle. And Tom Hanks, Hollywood icon, two-time Oscar winner, stepped quietly into a stranger's garage just to stay dry.
Tom sat quietly on the edge of the old couch, rainwater dripping from his sleeves onto the concrete floor. He didn't touch anything, didn't call out. He just sat, waiting, unsure if someone would show up or call the cops. Minutes passed, then footsteps. Not loud, but deliberate. A screen door creaked open from the house. A silhouette appeared, tall, older, cautious. It was an elderly man in his late 60s, flannel shirt tucked into faded jeans, holding a flashlight and a worn-out curiosity. "Can I help you?" the man asked, peering into the garage. Tom stood up, hands raised slightly, as if to say he meant no harm. "I'm sorry, my car broke down a few miles back. I just needed to get out of the rain." The man paused, flashlight still aimed toward Tom's face, until his eyes squinted. "Wait a minute, You look familiar." Tom smiled, the kind of humble, slightly embarrassed smile he'd used 1,000 times. "Yeah," he said, "I get that sometimes." But the old man didn't gasp, didn't scream, didn't pull out a phone to record. He just said, "Well, famous or not, you're drenched. Come inside before you catch pneumonia." Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and old books. A fireplace crackled in the corner. The stranger handed him a towel and poured 2 mugs of coffee. No questions, no fanfare. "Name's Walter," the man said, settling into an armchair. "Retired mechanic, live alone, and you?" Tom paused, then simply replied, "Tom. Not Tom Hanks, just Tom." Walter nodded. "Well, Tom, any man wandering in the rain deserves a warm drink and a dry place to sit. Doesn't matter who he is." And just like that, they began to talk. About cars, about life, about the way the world used to be. Walter never once asked for a selfie, never mentioned a movie. It was like, for the first time in years, Tom Hanks was just another guy, and he loved it. The hours slipped by unnoticed. 2 strangers, one a global icon, the other a retired mechanic, talking like old friends in a small, forgotten corner of the world. At first, it was surface level. Cars, the weather, the kind of coffee Walter swore was better than anything in Hollywood. But slowly, as the night deepened, so did the conversation. Tom took a sip of the steaming mug and stared into the fire. "You ever feel like the more people know your name, the less they really know you?" he asked. Walter didn't answer right away. He leaned back, eyes heavy with years. "My wife used to say that people collect faces, but forget to see souls." Tom nodded. That hit home, more than he'd expected. Then came the silence. The kind that doesn't feel awkward, the kind that lets truth settle. "I lost a friend recently," Tom said softly. "He was the only one who didn't care about the Hollywood stuff, just cared about me." Walter looked up. That kind of loss doesn't leave quietly. Tom smiled, eyes misty. "Sometimes I think the only time I feel like myself anymore is when I'm away from all of it. The lights, the interviews, the fake smiles." Walter stood, walked to the bookshelf, and pulled out an old photo in a cracked frame. A young woman smiling beside a man in uniform. "My wife," he said, handing it to Tom. "Gone 10 years now. Cancer. She used to tell me, never mistake being seen for being known. Took me a lifetime to understand that." Tom stared at the photo, then at Walter. "You ever miss who you used to be?" he asked. Walter chuckled. "Every day, but some parts of us don't disappear. They just hide until we're ready to remember them." The room was quiet again, but not empty. Something in that conversation had shifted. For the first time in a long time, Tom didn't feel like a star or a celebrity or even an actor. He felt human, heard, seen, like a soul that mattered not because of who he was on screen, but because of who he still was inside. Morning came quietly. No alarms, no flashing cameras. just the soft whistle of wind slipping through the trees and the golden light of a small town sunrise. Tom Hanks woke to the smell of eggs sizzling and coffee brewing. Real coffee, the kind that fills the whole house with comfort. He sat up slowly on the old couch in Walter's garage, the same one he'd wandered into the night before like a lost traveler from another life. For a second, he almost forgot who he was, and it felt nice. Inside the kitchen, Walter was already moving like clockwork, frying pan in one hand, spatula in the other. "Hope you like your eggs over easy," Walter called out without looking up. Tom smiled, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. At this point, I'd eat 'em raw. They sat across from each other at a tiny wooden table worn down by time and memories. No press, no assistants, just two men and a couple of mismatched mugs. "Didn't think I'd wake up in a stranger's house and feel more at home than I do in my own," Tom said, almost to himself. Walter chuckled. "Well, maybe you just needed the right kind of strange." They shared a quiet laugh, honest, simple, the kind that sticks with you. After breakfast, Walter handed him a folded piece of paper. On it, a hand-drawn map. "Closest mechanic's a few miles west. Tell 'em Walter sent you. They'll give you a fair deal." Tom took it, nodded. "Thank you for everything." Walter shrugged, sipping the last of his coffee. "Wasn't much, but it was. It was more than much. It was kindness, real, unfiltered, unexpected." As Tom walked back down that country road, sun on his face and the world slowly waking up around him, he felt something he hadn't in a long time. Peace. Sometimes healing doesn't come from a therapist or a retreat. Sometimes it comes from a stranger with a good heart and a warm cup of coffee. And in the quiet of that morning, Tom Hanks knew this story, this night, would stay with him forever. Tom was already a few steps away when he realized he didn't even know Walter's last name. He turned back, but the door was already closed. Still, something pulled at him, a feeling like he was leaving something unfinished. He made a mental note to return once his car was fixed. Maybe bring Walter a signed book, or at least a proper thank you. But fate had other plans. Tom was sitting in a small town cafe a few towns over, sipping on a fresh cup of coffee, still thinking about that strange, beautiful night. Out of curiosity, he asked the waitress, "Hey, you know a guy named Walter? Lives out by the old mill road? Retired mechanic, kind eyes?" Her expression froze. "You mean old man Walter?" Tom smiled. "Yeah, that's him. Great guy. Helped me out the other night." The waitress blinked, confused. "Sir, Walter passed away last winter." Tom's hand paused mid-sip. "What?" "Yeah, cancer. He used to fix everyone's cars around here. Lived alone after his wife passed. Nicest man you'd ever meet. We all miss him." Tom's heart dropped. He pulled out the map Walter had drawn him. The ink slightly faded, but real, tangible. "He gave me this." The waitress stepped closer, her voice gentle now. "That's definitely his handwriting, but, sir, he's been gone almost a year." Tom stared at the paper in disbelief. Every detail from that night came flooding back. The warmth of the fire, the photograph of Walter's wife, the wisdom in his words. It didn't feel like a dream. It felt real, too real. And maybe that's because it was. Maybe Walter had one last act of kindness left in him, one last soul to help before resting in peace. Or maybe, just maybe, sometimes the universe sends us what we need in the form we're most likely to believe. Tom Hanks, actor, legend, icon, had been saved, not by a fan, or a bodyguard, or a therapist, but by the spirit of a man who simply lived to help others. And somewhere, far beyond the noise of this world, maybe Walter smiled one last time, knowing he'd made a difference. Weeks passed, but the memory of that night never left Tom Hanks. He returned to LA, back to the chaos of cameras, scripts, and flashing lights. But something inside him had shifted. There was a stillness now, a quiet corner in his soul where Walter lived on. He started writing again, not lines for a role, but words from his heart, about kindness, about strangers, about moments that change everything. He told no one the full story, not the press, not the studios. It was his to keep, his moment of truth in a world built on make-believe. But the impact was visible. Tom began donating quietly to small-town repair shops. He launched a foundation in memory of WH. Those were the only initials, no explanation given. He started showing up to unannounced events, talking to everyday people, asking about their stories. He listened more, smiled softer, hugged longer. Because he knew now, sometimes it takes losing yourself in the middle of nowhere to find who you really are. Sometimes a broken car leads you to a man who no longer exists in this world, but leaves a mark more real than any billboard in Hollywood. And sometimes the most heroic acts don't happen on movie screens. They happen in a stranger's garage, under a starry sky, with nothing more than a warm meal, a couch, and the courage to care. If this story moved you, even just a little, don't keep it to yourself. Hit the like button so more people can discover moments like these. Subscribe for more emotional journeys, untold tales, and the kind of stories Hollywood never shows. And hey, have you ever met a stranger who changed your life? Drop your story in the comments. We read every single one. Until next time, keep believing in the unexpected.